This is Allison with a tutorial for you on reading basic charts. The charts we're going to go over today have just knit and purl stitches. They're pretty simple charts, and we're just going to go through some of the basics of how to interpret them. So to start, first we're going to look at our key and making sure we understand the symbols on the chart. So our plain white blank square, each square is one stitch, and it means to knit that stitch if you're on the right side of the fabric, meaning the public side of the fabric that's facing out, or purl if you're on the wrong side of the fabric. So knitting charts depict what the stitches look like on the right side, the public side of the fabric. So if you do a knit stitch on the right side, if you're working in stockinette stitch, for example, your knit stitch always makes a purl stitch on the other side. So we're going to, so that's why we have knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. By extension, then we have our symbol that means purl on the right side, means to knit on the wrong side. And we also have red lines, which means that's our pattern repeat. So those stitches that are within those lines get repeated across the row. We have some notes on this chart. It tells us to work from right to left on right side rows and from left to right on wrong side rows. This is pretty standard for charts. So on this chart, we're starting with a right side row with row 1, and we're going to start here in the bottom corner, the bottom right corner of the chart. And we're going to read that row from right to left, which is the same direction that we knit. If you think about your stitches on your needle, when you've got a row on there, if you're knitting your stitches from right to left across your row. Now on the wrong side, because again, the chart is really depicting what we are seeing on the right side. On the wrong side, you're doing everything in reverse. You're reading it backwards from left to right, the opposite direction of how we knit. And to help you remember which side to start on, your row number for a wrong side row is going to be on the left. That's where you're starting your row, and we're working this way. And we have in this chart, as I said, a pattern repeat indicated with the red box. And these stitches are going to get repeated across the row. So if we're doing row 1, we would do knit, 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 5 knit stitches. And here we're reaching this pattern repeat box. And then we're doing 4 purls, 1, 2, 3, 4 purls, and then 4 knits. And then instead of doing this last stitch, we're going to go back to the beginning of the repeat. And we're going to do purl 4, knit 4, purl 4, knit 4, until we get to where we just have that one last stitch, and then we knit that last stitch. Now for the wrong side, where we're going the opposite direction, this first stitch, which looks like a purl, but we're on the wrong side, we're going to knit that stitch because we're on the wrong side. So we're knitting 1, and then we're doing purl 4, because we're on the wrong side, knit 4. Purl 4, knit 4, until we get to the last 5 stitches on our needle, and then we're doing purl 4, knit 1. For this chart, one thing that's nice, if you're very new to reading charts, is that you can follow right along on your written instructions, and it'll be exactly the same. So if we look again at row 1, and the written instruction says rows 1 and 3, because you can see on the chart they're done exactly the same way. So for this row, we do knit 5, and then here's our pattern repeat, which is indicated with a star in our written instructions. Purl 4, knit 4. We're repeating that across, and then our last stitch is knit 1. And then on the wrong side, we have knit 1, purl 4, knit 4, repeating that across and ending purl 4, knit 1. I like to place a Post-it note just above the row that I'm working. And the reason, sometimes people put the Post-it note under the row that you're working, but I like to put it right above the row that I'm working. And the reason for that is that it makes it easier to read your knitting as you go. So as I go through and I work row 2 and row 3 and row 4, so if I've just worked row 4 and now I'm about to go to row 5, which is a right side row, I can look at my knitting and I can see here that I have exactly what's depicted on the chart in these first 4 rows. I have knits and then purls and then knits and then purls and then knits and my edge stitch. So when I'm working row 5, which on this chart is where things change suddenly, you can see that these purls right here are going right on top of these knits. And so it makes it nice and easy to do my first knit 1. And then I see I have 4 purls and I can see they're stacked right on top of these 4 knits. So it makes it nice and easy for me to then see that I'm supposed to purl those 4. And then the next 4, as I'm starting my pattern repeat, I'm doing knit stitches, but there's purls underneath it. So I'm going to knit these 4 and so on across my row. So that's a nice way to read your knitting, and it's and you can also compare it alongside the written instructions. Now turning to the next block in our mystery knit along, another texture block. For this chart, it's a bigger chart, it's a bigger repeat, there's a little bit more going on. So let's just look at what else we have here. Just like before, we have the key to the chart. It has the same symbols that were on the last chart we looked at. The knit on right side and purl on wrong side, and the dot is purl on right side, knit on wrong side, and we have our pattern repeat. And then in the chart notes, same as before, we're working from right to left on right side rows and from left to right on wrong side rows. And then it gives us a little bit more information here. It's telling us that we're going to work rows 1 to 3 once, and then we're going to work rows 4 through 15 7 times. So we're repeating that, and that's why you have the repeat lines in the middle of the chart like this too, because it's telling you those are the rows that we're going to repeat. These are the stitches that we're repeating within the row. So we're repeating just rows 4 through 15, and then we're ending with rows 16 through 18. And unlike the last chart that we looked at, on this one, the repeats don't exactly match up with the written instruction. The repeat lines are not in the same place as the repeat is written in the written instruction. And the reason for that is that the written instructions are giving you the directions in a way that if you were not looking at the chart at all and just looking at these written instructions, it makes it kind of easy to remember kind of where the repeat is. So for example, if we look at row 3, actually let's look at row 4. If we look at row 4, in the written instructions it says knit 7 and then it has the asterisk, whereas you can see that here we have the knit 7 and then you have a purl and a knit, and then that's where you're starting your repeat. And then purl, knit, purl, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the 7. And then purl, knit is at the beginning. So it's just expressing it differently, but it's doing the same thing. It's going to make the same row. It just makes it a little bit trickier if you wanted to look at the written instructions and these instructions. If we're looking at the written instructions, you have knit 7, then purl 1, knit 1 twice, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, and then purl 1, purl 1, and then knit 7. There's your 7. And then you're repeating starting with this purl. So your repeat, if it were written the same way, your repeat would actually be from here to here. So it's 2 stitches over. So it's, again, it makes the same result, but it's just written a little bit differently. One thing, if you're looking at the chart, something a lot of knitters like to do is put a stitch marker where each of your repeats is. So you would, whereas if you did that with the written instructions, your stitch marker would move around all the time. With this, it's your stitch marker staying in the same spot. So that is just another thing to think about when you're reading charts. Sometimes it's easy to go back and forth, but sometimes you want to pick either the written instructions or the chart to follow. And that is all for our lesson on basic charts. And we'll be back another time with some cable charts and lace charts. So stay tuned.